Special thanks to our promotional partners at the American Philatelic Society.
The APS is the largest stamp collecting organization in the world, supporting collectors of any level worldwide.
For more information about membership and APS services, visit stamps.org.
Hi, I'm Charles Epting from H.R. Harmer in New York City.
And I'm Michael Cortese of Noble Spirit in Pittsfield, New Hampshire.
And this is Conversations with Philatelists.
Charles, I'm super excited about our guest today. Today we're talking to Mark Cwiakala, the director of the Freaks and Errors documentary on stamps. We got a chance to see the documentary in Monaco, Phil, in 2017?
Correct. That was where it premiered. And how many people get to have their movie premiere in Monaco, of all places? That's a real feather in his cap, I think.
Yeah, it was an exciting experience, and just watching it premiere there with all the people alongside people who were interviewed in the movie.
That's the thing. And after you see it, then you go to a show and it's like, he's from the movie. It's funny. We're so invested in this hobby that we recognize most, if not all, of the players in the film. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to watch, and it was a lot of fun to listen to people that we've known for so long talk about their collections or talk about the hobby and what it means to them.
And I know this really had a big impact on people. George Holshauer, who was in the documentary, you go to his office and there's a huge movie poster hanging on his window to this day, as far as I know, because he was so excited to take part in this. I think this was really sort of a galvanizing moment for a lot of collectors and dealers and other people, somehow involved in the hobby.
Yeah. Well, he was a massive part of the documentary. It was so fun to listen to him.
When you have a personality like that, you have to make him a big part of it. So I'm excited to talk to Mark. And Mark's father is very well known in the hobby as well, one of the leading auction agents. So it'll be fun to hear how Mark even came to get involved in such a project, how he thought up a project on stamps. It'll be again, I think, really fascinating to hear the backstory.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So let's, without further ado, let's bring him in.
Absolutely. Hello.
Hey.
Hi, guys.
How you doing?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Awesome. Sorry about my backdrop. I've been relegated to the bedroom because of school and people actually trying to get some work done.
Not a problem. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor.
Oh, and likewise. So are you, someone's in the East Coast and are you still in California?
I was in California yesterday. Now I'm back in New York. I was on the ground in California for 28 hours.
Oh, wow.
It was a real quick hit, and then I took a red eye last night, landed at 6:30, took the train straight into the office, worked until I crashed at about 1:30.
Wow, that's
it's fun. It's if you like the work, I guess. But now I'm back home so I can get an early night tonight because I'm running on about 3 hours of sleep. So
yeah, I'm sure.
Forgive any nonsensical question.
Oh, no problem. That's my everyday.
So to kick things off, can you talk a little bit about your personal journey with stamps? Because obviously it runs in the family, and sort of what led, before the movie even, what was your relationship with stamps? What was your familiarity? How did you get to the point where you thought, hey, I should make a documentary about stamp collecting?
Sure. Well, both, like as you said, my family has been involved in stamps for actually this year, I think about 100 years, because my grandfather started collecting. My grandfather was born in 1903, and he lived to be almost 100, and he started collecting early on, like right around in the 1920s. And he started collecting, and then he moved from collecting to do like, it was a small-time dealer in Chicago, mostly like, pocket dealing, and he had a small shop in the basement of his house. And from there, my father got interested in it because of my grandfather, not so much because he wanted to, it's because he had to. My grandfather was one of those, like everybody else, who had one of those offices and stores that you couldn't touch anything. Yet and it was a complete mess, but it was like an organized mess that he knew where everything was. And so my father would go and try to grab stamps and send mail. This is like in the 50s and the 1940s and 50s. And so he said, you know what, if you're going to grab the stamps, you have to grab the right stamps. And so let me teach you which ones are right and which ones you don't want to touch. And so my father kind of fell in love with stamps as a collector early on when he was a young kid. And then he saw the opportunity to become an auction agent kind of in the late 60s, because there was a time when he was traveling as a chemical engineer, which was his J job. And he would travel, he had a pretty amazing job. He traveled around the world and he sourced oils and mostly oils, flavors, and fragrances for personal care products. So every soap, before they started making it synthetically, would have to get oils for palm oils and olive oils and coconut oils. So as he was traveling, he would go and meet all these dealers and collectors who were friends of my grandfather, because my grandfather also was a prolific communicator. He wrote letters to everyone. He got, he wanted to get mail. They traded stamps internationally. And so my father saw that there was a lot of people who were trying to do the auctions in New York who weren't able to fly in. So he would represent them. And it was like a little side gig for him. So he would go to a Siegel auction and he would get, 6 months down the line, he would get a couple $100 as an agent. But at the time, it was a lot of money. And it really helped out when having 3 kids and everything else. So he kind of built his business through that. So I grew up with my grandfather and my father in the kind of the stamp business, but also around me, because I'm probably quite a bit older than you guys, there were a lot of people in my generation who also collected as kids. So I didn't think anybody didn't collect. And that kind of goes into doing a film about documentary, because I always assumed it was just part of what everybody did. Like most people I know have a father or a grandparent, it's usually grandfather or uncle, who collected. And so it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I realized that not everybody knew about what philately was, and the difference between being a philatelist and being a stamp collector, and what stamps are worth. And when I was talking to more and more people, which actually was, I'm sure you guys feel the same way, it's a great icebreaker, and also it's a great topic for somebody who's trying to ask somebody out. Like I remember being young and I would bring up stamp collecting, or I would say, you throw it out there like, oh, I have to do an auction this week, and I'm busy, and what's an auction? And that led to me being able to impress people with my family's history, not mine, and it really kind of helped out.
It either works or backfires.
Well,
it goes one of two ways.
And Charles, with you just being on a flight, I use it a lot on planes because it usually shuts people down. And like, especially because on planes, I just like to
better than putting headphones in.
Exactly. I'd rather read or get some work done or sleep. I don't really like to talk to the person next to me. So I'll usually say that, and hopefully it'll shut them down. And so, I was also, we worked in advertising. So my background was in visual arts, not so much film, but I also was dabbling in doing short films, and I was doing short films, but also I really love documentaries. Like I can watch any doc anytime, because I find people and things fascinating. And, I realized I wanted to do a documentary, and I actually didn't think about stamps at first. I was picking a bunch of different other topics, and somebody had mentioned to me, why don't you do a documentary on stamps? And the reason why I didn't think about it as much is because for me, a documentary has a very definite beginning and either a definite ending or something that you could go on and try to go past the documentarian's research and find out something for yourself. And usually it's something a little bit more stimulated. It could be a competition. It could be a death or a mystery. With stamps, there's really no ending. It just kind of continues. So the hardest part being, I think, a designer is that in my head, before the film started, it was already finished. I kind of had an idea of I want this to end with some amazing thing to happen in the stamp world. But again, it was completely kind of a nebulous idea, and I didn't really know how this was going to work out. So it wasn't until I started to think about all the different angles of stamp collectors that I decided to do the film, because I didn't also want to do something with a Wikipedia page. I didn't want to do a history of stamps. I want to do something about the collectors, because that really is what I remember the most of being a kid and having people from around the world being in contact with my family and coming into Chicago and showing up at the house, and everybody, and the cast of characters, and a lot of them are not with us anymore, but there's a lot of people who are really fascinating and all a little bit wild. So I knew once I realized that I was going to do about the people, then it was really just about finding the right people and kind of crafting the story.
Yeah, so having that connection already to the hobby, did you have an idea as to who you wanted to talk to in the beginning?
I did. There was a few people, and this is also not being any experience in. I was actually very lucky. I got to talk to a few people. One of them was Gordon Quinn from. I'm not sure you guys are familiar with Cartem Quinn Films. They do some incredibly moving and socially relevant films. Cartem Quinn was founded by 3 people. One of them, the Quinn part, is this documentarian named Gordon Quinn. He's in Chicago. He actually was a stamp collector also. And so him and I sat down. He really gave me a great lesson on what to do and what not to do. And also to, when you're talking to people, realize you're going to talk to 100 people, and out of those 100, you might pick 4 or 5. So I knew the people I wanted to talk to. A lot of them were a lot older. So I made sure I did kind of a hierarchy of people who were in their 80s and 90s, because I wanted to talk to them before something happened. But a few of them, like Clyde Jennings, I don't know if you're familiar with Clyde. He was he was phenomenal. I talked to him right before he passed away. He didn't make it into the film because I just didn't have enough of him to make it a full story. But I was looking for people who had had charisma and had an interesting the way they got into stamp collecting, but also had an impact on stamp collecting throughout their whole lives. So I really was looking for that, because there's a lot of people out there who just collected because it's something to do. And I talked to easily 24 people, and and then also that's the thing, you travel and you film, there's a big expense. There's a bunch of people I have that were great interviews, but all they were they're collecting because it was something to do, and I didn't want that. I wanted people who were collecting for a reason.
Yeah, you really tailored the number of people that you had to tell the story that you wanted to tell, which is right. the passion behind the hobby and everything like that. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and so that with that being said, also in the narrative, I had an idea about what I wanted to show in the beginning. The film's beginning, I'm not kidding, with Neil Steinberg has been the same. It has never changed. The film has gone through maybe 30 different cuts. I had traditional people finishing each other's stories, like a traditional doc style. Mm-hmm. And one time my wife watched that, and I thought I was done. I thought it looked really good. My wife watched it, and she said, I'm just getting into somebody's story, and you're cutting to somebody else who's finishing the story, but it's not their story. You're doing it like, which is what they do, say, I started collecting while I was, so you cut to the next person, 10, 4, 6. And that's when I started to extend the stories as vignettes, so you could actually get a feel for this person all the way through, and then hopefully wrap it up at the end. But Neil Steinberg's beginning has been the same since then, because I wanted the film to be constructed in a way where it kind of answered the questions that people always ask me, and I'm sure you guys also, when you meet somebody, say, what do you do? Well, I'm in the stamp business. There's a stamp business? Yes, it is. It's $1 billion a year. People still collect. It's like you're saying that I can't believe that. I don't know. I mean, I thought it was dead. So answering those questions first to get people to feel comfortable, like, oh, that's what I thought, and then ending the film in a way it's when they realize, oh, it's still thriving, and it's still exciting, it's still relevant. Probably more now than today. When I finished it, I really felt the social aspect of it, which I pushed a little bit, was much more important now than it ever was.
How long did it take you to film from the first time you turned on the camera to the final cut? It took you quite some time, right?
A long time. The first interview I did was in 2005. Mm-hmm. And so, wow. I know, right? Yeah. And so actually, if you look at that footage is all on tape. I mean, that's how it looks. It looks different, because what I started from 2005, I started filming haphazardly, just as I said, to get people on. I got Cheryl Gans, who she was phenomenal all 5 times I interviewed her.
Oh, wow.
Clyde Jennings and oh man, I'm trying to think of all the people that I got in the beginning. I got a bunch of people locally in Chicago. I got Sonny Hagendorf. I got a lot of people in the beginning, and then it was kind of like then I couldn't figure. Then I realized I needed money, and then my daughter was born, and then I kind of put on the side, and then my son was born, and so really from 2006 to 2008 to 9, it was kind of dead, and it was actually kind of they always say do what you think about every day. It honestly ate every day I thought about it, and it really it was killing me as time went by, and then in 2009. I quit my job right during the recession, which is always a good idea, right? And I started a production company, because I was doing more commercial work as in advertising, directing commercials. And I thought, you know what, this is a good time to start something of my own, and then I'll have what I need to finish the film. So once that got off the ground in 2010, I really started filming in late 2011, 2012. And so it was about 5 years from then till when I finished the film. Mm-hmm. And there was some start-stop, obviously, with, I would do it in between. I also didn't want two things I didn't want to do. I self-financed 75% of it, and the film cost just under $100,000, which seems absurd, and it kind of is. But I feel like I don't have a hobby, so that was kind of my hobby. And also, I was trying to do it without borrowing money or putting myself in credit card debt. So I did it. I would get some extra money from a job, and I would put it towards the film. So it took a little bit longer for that reason too.
You obviously were looking for things that would contribute to the narrative, and you were looking for, sound bites and stories that worked. But as you said, I'm sure you've got countless hours of footage that didn't fit into the documentary. Did you look at yourself, because when I hear that and I think about, the people we may have lost since you recorded them, you're almost in a way a historian and a field, like an Alan Lomax of the stamp world, I would say. Do you look at yourself like that at all? And do you think that, some of the footage that maybe wasn't used and the stories that didn't make the final cut could have life down the road when, we're remembering these people who you had the unique opportunity to talk to? Do you think that a lot of the footage that maybe didn't make the documentary will, find a purpose someday?
Well, to answer your first part of your question, I kind of consider myself a hack. I mean, I am the epitome of imposter syndrome because a lot of people, I tend to get involved in things I probably don't have a lot of experience in, but I also have a lot of enthusiasm. And for me, I talked to a lot of I have a filmmaker friend who did, I don't know if you're familiar with the Somm series of wine documentaries. So Jason Wise is a friend of mine, and he grew up in film. He still shoots 35 millimeter, and the whole time he was just like ripping on me about. He's like, you don't know what you're getting into, and I was like, yeah, but I think I can do this. I think if you can tell a story, if you can write a paper, an article, you can do it. You can do a film, and so so I don't consider myself a historian per se. I just am really interested in what people have to say. And I think that people fascinate me more than anything else. I feel like people are predictably unpredictable. And if you spend enough time with them, you will see the true person, right? I mean, a lot of people I talk to, I'd have to go back because they were kind of on edge or they weren't felt comfortable. And then within, a couple of times I would interview people, they would let me into they would tell me things I just wouldn't even put on the film because it just seemed unnecessary. And I didn't really have I didn't want this to be an expose. A lot of people thought I was going to make fun of people, and I said, no, I'm not editing this to make anybody look stupid or look like complete losers. I wanted to show people how their passion has affected their lives. So when it comes down to the other footage, I have thought about going through. I actually have it all on a huge drive. I have a huge drive, and it's all stored away and backed up. What I would be interested, actually, one of the people that have been bothering me, and he actually stopped, was Alex Heyman. Because Alex I interviewed in 2006.
Oh, wow.
And I interviewed him again in 2012. And then I saw him probably about a year ago, and he hasn't changed. And actually more fascinating is maybe a doc about Alex Heyman if he's actually human, because he doesn't look any different.
Yeah.
And so that's
I've seen photos of him with the first YPLF class way back when, and it's Alex.
It's Alex. It's the same person. Yeah. So I do have some people. Somebody has some footage, and I forgot who it was. Some stamp collector has a bunch of footage. I think it's at the New York Collectors Club of interviews with older collectors from like the 70s and 80s. I would probably, and I should, like everything else, like to go through this and just offer the footage up. The only issue is it does, as you guys know, I hate doing this to people. I want to edit it so it's actually like concise. Because a lot of times I will get, footage from people to use on other projects, and they'll send me their drive, and it's like, oh, I've got to I don't want to do that to anybody, so I wouldn't mind taking like the Alex stuff and cutting it down to like a 20-minute segment. So I probably will end up doing that, maybe my next long flight. Start and then offering it up to, especially the Clyde Jennings. Clyde was such a fascinating character, the way he really just had such a joie de vivre, and there was some really good stuff. Cheryl Gans, she's the same from the first interview. Her enthusiasm, she would be great to have like a little time capsule. So yeah, I would probably do that and figure out a great place to put it so people can watch it, even if it was at a museum where it could just loop on screens.
How many hours is it total? The uncut.
Actually the first version was almost 3 hours, and I actually kind of was freaking out because I couldn't figure out how to cut it down. And then somebody approached me from PBS and said we could probably make this a series. And I thought, great, that's a really good idea. And then it just took forever to get that going. They wanted to be really educational, and the constraints were a little bit too much. So I actually started to narrow it down while we were at the talks and got it down to the hour and a half I have. But I've got probably 100 hours of footage total, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's a lot. It is crazy. There's a lot of people. I interviewed probably 30 people from 2012 on, and I've got probably another 10 before that.
What was the screening in Monaco like? What was the reception like for you? When this finally saw the light of day. How did collectors react? What was the feedback you got?
Well, didn't want to be in the same room. Like I can't watch it's like I can't watch myself on the Zoom screen. I didn't even want to be.
You're not going to be watching this episode.
No, I'm not going to be watching. No, yeah, I can't. I don't want to listen to myself. And so, my wife was there with me, and she said, you have to go in there and see what it's like. So I sat up against the wall, like down behind everybody, and I was a wreck until I heard the first kind of giggles in the beginning. And I felt like giggles were because of something Neil Steinberg had said. I was like, okay, this is good. This is like, I'm getting a reaction. The reception was, I think, great. I think there's a few, it's funny because the only thing I remember is one gentleman who I'd never met before come up to me and he didn't like it.
Oh, no.
It becomes storming up to me. He said, I didn't like it. And I said, okay, well, what didn't you like about it? He's like, any of it. And then he walked away. That's the only thing I remember. I don't like it, any of it. And so, I guess it was well received. I got a lot of the reception was really good. And I really enjoyed seeing people watch it. It's not a traditional doc. It's not for everybody. I think a lot of people in the stamp community may not like it because it seems negative, but in the end, it does come out to be positive. But I still have to, I wanted to show the different, stamp collecting is phenomenal because you could be an Ian Gibson Smith and out there just like in the spotlight.
Make a note that we should have Ian on. That's
yes.
Well, he was phenomenal in the documentary. That was.
Oh, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was phenomenal. I've got a lot more of Ian that I would have to put like a director's cut, like an unrated director's cut, because a lot of the stuff I have to like cut out because he just would go off and talk and his tangents and his stories and how it's really good. It's gold.
That gets the NC-17 rating.
Exactly right. Yeah, which I'm sure be like less people even want to see that one. But I wanted to show that you could do this as a solitary hobby, and you could do it your whole life, or you could do it as as something you use to meet people as a completely social hobby, and you can get out of it something your entire. I don't know any hobby that anybody can do their whole lives. I mean, there's a lot of collectibles, obviously, but this is something that continues on. So I really wanted to show that it's not negative or positive. It is what you want to take out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely showed that in the beginning with Douglas Weiss and then Forte in the beginning with the completely contrasting stories of Douglas saying it was 100% social for him and he loved the friends and the family he got, and then Forte coming in and saying it's much more solitary to him and it's more about the stamps. It was it started it off on the right foot. I knew exactly where you kind of what you wanted to portray as soon as I saw that.
Thanks. I had that was the biggest part, to be honest with you, from Cheryl on to almost the ending, because the ending obviously I wasn't expecting the Penny Magenta to be sold. I have a complete alt ending that's super kind of ethereal and conceptual, and it's watching it now I can't believe I even considered it because I had like this like really like it was almost like a United commercial, It was like these huge scenes of like stamp collectors and children running and music, and I was like, this is terrible. I was like, I can't believe I thought this was going to be an ending. But that after Neil Steinberg and before Cheryl Gans, I must have recut that a dozen times because I couldn't figure out how to transition from one to another. And I think just having, as you said, I'm glad you noticed that, because having the complete contrast in the beginning set the tone for the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a mirror where you if you want to have a more humorous view of the hobby, or if you want to have a more sentimental view of the hobby, it really does seem like you can get out of it whatever your take of the hobby is. It seems like that's reflected in the movie. It's nice that there's no no agenda, it seems, except for what you
none.
yourself want to project onto the film.
Right. Yeah, and I usually come into all my projects with no agenda. I mean, obviously, I have an idea because I write a lot of right now. I'm in the process right now of developing a bunch of different series and docs. I'm trying to get off the ground, and that's the biggest question people ask me is that you're trying to make your film, but really it's more my aesthetic and the story I want to hear than the story I want to tell. I really want people to tell their own story and have the time to do it because, if you take, the film could have been about Holshauer, the entire film. He's somebody who I have so much of him and you've been to his office.
He still has the poster hanging. I mentioned that in the introduction. He still has your poster hanging on his window, but his office is, there's no words to describe it. Yeah, and
it does have matches everywhere. I remember my crew kept looking at me, pointing to like smoking matches on the carpet, and so I'm like, this is gonna burn everything up.
Little piles of pipe ash on the carpet.
Pipe ash on the carpet, and there could have been a lot more of him, and it's difficult because when you have such strong personalities, you don't want them to take over the entire story, And so I was trying to have the film start slowly and then crescendo to a point where you realize that it is important. Stamps aren't very important when it comes down to whether you collect stamps or China. It's the idea that you are bringing people together, and it is a community, which we just are. I said we are losing a lot. A lot of this film was based on a book called Bowling Alone, which is a fantastic book about the death of bowling leagues. And so when I read Bowling Alone back in I think it was in the early, I thought, I get it. Like nobody's men's clubs, for lack of a better term, don't really exist. And these community groups are less and less about the community and more about either whatever action they're taking within their community. And people just don't get together as groups anymore. So I really wanted to show that this is still a cumulatively group hobby that can also be wildly rewarding on its own.
Yeah, I think that definitely showed through. And I liked how you compared and contrasted the collectors with the Holshauer, the dealer aspect. It was nice to see both sides represented there and kind of get a look into how the people who sell stamps operate and how they have to understand not only the stamps but the people who collect stamps. That was
thank you.
That was an interesting.
And George was, and I needed George, or I needed somebody. I had David Feldman, and I had Sonny Hagendorf. I'm trying to think of the other dealers that I spoke with, high end dealers, because I needed to also, I guess, in a very, mostly like in a commercial level, wanted to throw the money in there just to get interest. Because I said I wanted to make a film for non-collectors, and so I wanted people who were watching this realize, I didn't realize it's a multi-million-dollar a year business, just to keep the attention going. Because an hour and a half is a long time to talk about stamps, and I think that's adding that in there gave people a reason to kind of think, what is at the end of this? Is there some stamp that I don't know about or that's worth $10 million? And luckily there was. Yeah.
It was a fun story. George's story. It wasn't just for collectors. It was for people.
Right.
So was there an interview story that didn't make it into the cut that you were really struggling to try and fit it in there? Something that you found most interesting that didn't quite.
Yes, there's a few people that Stephen Heller, who used to be the design critic of the New York Times. He also is now, I believe his job is he's a professor at Tisch, might be Tisch School of the Arts in New York. He had a really excellent kind of like looking at the aesthetic of stamps themselves. The nice thing about it is that he was a collector as a kid, but then now his job is as a designer. He wrote a book about stamps, and he wrote about the way art and stamps go together. And it's fascinating talking about how the idea that you can really tell what's going on in the country by their stamps, and also seeing how art has reflected itself into stamps, even though people don't consider stamps as little works of art. There's a big chunk of the film was going to be about stamps as art. And it would have been out of left field. I had it in there for a long time, and it was like people were talking about it. I had Stephen Heller, and I had this this other I forgot his name now. This kid in Boston who has his own publishing house. He was talking about stamps. So I had a lot of people who were talking about stamp artists and the artist stamp movement even. So I had a couple people in there who I think as a grouping made a really good 15 minutes of stamp art, but it just seemed weird. And then I broke it up and tried to like pepper it in, that even seemed weirder. So I think that the people that are in there are the people I really always wanted to be in there. I mean, not to say that I had any vision for this film, but I really knew as soon as I started talking to people that they were going to be in. I mean, David Feldman his interview is spotless. I mean, he doesn't miss a beat. He's articulate, and he's interesting if you like that kind of, like, if you want to talk about high-end stamps and like, it's all good, but it wasn't enough to actually have him in that he would offset somebody else. If somebody had to give, I feel like I picked the people who should have been in there.
Yeah.
So what's next? Obviously you've got life outside of the stamp world, but do you plan on again? It really does, and having known your father for a long time, it really does seem like it's in the blood.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. He should have been in the film. Him and I get into a huge, and I'm sure you, Michael, you work with your father, right? He was my father. He was one of the worst interviews I had. He was like, I felt like I was 16. Like he wasn't him. It wasn't himself.
He's such a great storyteller.
Oh, but he wasn't on camera, and that was one thing I realized, because that's why I do stuff behind camera, because I don't ever want to be in front of it. In front of the camera, he just wasn't. He didn't let himself go and he's got amazing stories. And so I've got some interviews with him, and they just don't add anything. I regret that they're not in there, because it would be nice to have he's 80,000 years old now, so it's like, he's still doing well. But I mean, I would love to him to have been on there, but yeah, he wasn't really one that fit in anywhere. And also, he didn't want to talk about the business aspect of it, because he wanted to kind of keep the privacy between the business, the people that he dealt with, and
right.
He just didn't want it on camera. So he's one person I wish was in there, but at least I have the footage.
Yeah,
so they throw back his face every time I see him.
Do you see yourself remaining involved in the hobby? Now that the documentary's over, I think it would be easy to sort of put that chapter of your life behind you. But what do you see your involvement in philately as going forward? How do you fit into the puzzle now that the documentary's done?
I think that without, first of all, trying to promote it's one big thing, because this is another lesson I realized. Even though I got distribution, they really put the onus on the filmmaker to, there was a hard lesson learned, because they picked up the film. I didn't get paid for it. But the interesting thing about this distribution, which was totally new for me, but I was told by a few people I knew who've got films distributed, is that I need to promote the film as much as possible and get out to as many outlets, because I want people to see it. And now that it's available internationally, trying to get people to watch it internationally is great. I am in talks with PBS about a completely different subject series. I feel like if I can get them to buy off on this, it'll give me an opportunity to possibly do a series on stamps, kind of based off the movie. And it would be something more on the lines of travel and connecting people, but having stamps involved as kind of like the catalyst, just like a food show would be, traveling food show, but using philately and history. Because one thing I'm really adamant about is the idea that people are not learning history like they should. And that's how I learned all my history, through stamps. And it really frightens me how little people know about, I should say, especially younger generations, know about anything from the Vietnam War to the Holocaust to, stuff that happened in the 80s. So it's like the idea that I want to be able to do something that's educational, and hopefully stamps will have something to do with it.
That'd be fantastic. Would you have to completely start over? Or would you be able to use some of your old footage as well?
I would probably start over, because I want it to be a little bit more relevant and have it a combination of kind of, the way, have some like live action kind of host. I would want it hosted. I'd want it hosted. I'd want to be able to show, dead countries are huge. That could be an entire series of countries that you didn't know existed, or what. I don't think many people realize modern day Germany was not modern day Germany up until 120 years ago. No one knows about Italian states and German states. And also no one knows where Sarawak is, if you ask them. But like that, I think would have to be, it would be an educational, but I'm trying to figure out how to make it more entertaining to get people to watch it. And also on PBS, because not many people watch network anymore. So you have to figure
It
that
could
out.
almost be like an Anthony Bourdain does postage stamps.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's why I thought like something that's going to be very, very true to what it is, and not and something that, but you actually will show, because stamps, as I said, I do think that like Doug Weiss really hit this, and the community is so huge, even more than ever. And now that we're not hanging out with anybody, it's going to be even more huge once this all passes. And so, yeah, I think it could be something. I would like to push something. The key is you have to get in one thing and try to sell the other.
Yeah, but you'd know that the best. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. It's like new. It's like a learning experience. I mean, everybody I talk to, I listen to a lot of podcasts with directors. I mean, Martin Scorsese says the same thing. He's like, he fights for money for every movie he makes. Now he does.
Wow.
And it's crazy because nobody wants to buy off because nobody really knows where it's going to go. So really getting into the right people is huge.
Well, it's great that you've still got the passion behind stamps. It wasn't just, this is the documentary, okay,
Not
on
money.
to the next thing.
Oh, right,
It's-
right, yeah. And even like you see a shot of my kids at the table, that one shot that actually my daughter didn't make the face she did right before I cut. I could have let it a little longer, but she kind of ruined the shot, ruined the moment. But even my kids, when they grab their stamp envelope, I mean, they haven't done it in a little while, but they're 14 and 12, but they'll sit there with this stuff and they'll just look, they'll trade. You know, and they'll look at stuff that's like, it is not worth anything, and they're really excited about it. So there is still, especially for kids, the passion, but really getting adults, and I'm talking especially with, you know, my sister-in-law is a little bit younger than me, and she's like quintessential hipster, and her and her friends have knitting parties, like they get together and they sew, like all this, a lot of this could be very retro, and I think it could be appealing to a younger demographic.
Do you have a collection yourself?
I do. I kind of inherited a few, you know, for my grandfather left me his collection, and it looks more like behind your desk. It's a collection, collection of, I've got, tens of thousands of covers, British Palestine, a lot of British Palestine, postal history, a lot of early Poland, early Ukraine, early Russian, my father, and then I've got stuff. I got stamps. I've got a lot of Jamaica, of course Bermuda. So I've got a lot of mishmash that I don't really spend that much time with. And since my father obviously was in British philatelic, he's given me a lot of stuff that I've gone through. But you know, what's interesting about it is that it does tend to do to me I've always said I don't collect anything. I mean, it's really, I've always thought I had a problem. I don't like anything. I don't want anything in the house. I'm very minimalist when it comes down to it. But when I do look at the collection, I do realize I get sucked into it as much as everybody else does. I mean, there are times I'll grab a Scott catalog, and my wife's like, "Hey, it's 1 a.m. You know, you gotta stop." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, I just gotta find this one." So I think that power is universal.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in that position many times.
Yeah, and
As
it's
I'm
fun.
sure
It's
Charles
fun.
has too.
And it does like, you know, it really does bring you to a point where you can block everything out, and you really want to find out. And the searching for it's great. And also I think that when it comes down to here, I was also thinking the idea of, you know, and this is obviously not, this has not been proven, but I don't know any real stamp collectors who suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's. And that's a big talk we have that it could be something about this stimulation as you get older. I think it's important for that. There's I was actually in talks with a filmmaker who did a film about nursing homes, or I guess senior living facilities, who were installing or introducing kindergartens so that the people could actually interact with the young. It was good for both the kids and for the older people. And I had talked with her online about the idea of introducing stamp collecting to senior living facilities, especially since people are moving into them earlier and they're becoming more prominent. And I think it could be something there too. So it's like a spitballing of ideas I'm trying to put together into one cohesive idea.
So you said you talked to David Feldman. Did you do a lot of interviews in Europe as well?
I did. In let me see, where did the first Monaco Phil I went to was 2011. So I spent 3 days interviewing a ton of people. I had, you know, I also have a lot of European, I have a lot of French collectors. I'm trying to think, I had a couple stamp artists in there. David Feldman, we got a really good interview with David Feldman. George Holshauer, my initial interview with him was there. And so I did have a lot they just didn't. I wasn't able to figure out how they.
Yeah.
Europeans, for the most part, are more reserved, especially in the stamp. They didn't really. They were. I said, just like David Feldman, a fantastic speaker, but I didn't feel that enthusiasm that I really wanted, and so it didn't really add. So I filmed it. I filmed there, and then I filmed a little bit in Paris, just some B-roll. And I'm trying to think. I filmed in London a little bit, where Harmer's was, because I was going to do a little. That's another thing. I filmed a ton in Nassau Street. And I was trying to tell this history of stamps. Once again, that's why it was 3.5 hours at one point. It was just way too much stuff.
So this is a bit of an... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, that's why Ian actually saved me by us doing the quick. That was him and I really... Actually, it was we were out, I can't even tell, we were out till like 3 a.m. and out and eating and drinking and talking about how to get this history. And he's like, why don't I just spit it out tomorrow? And he did. And it actually worked out really well to like up the pacing a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a phenomenal and funny story, the Broken Crown. That the way he told it, you could tell the passion he had behind it, and the kind of laughing at himself for how much he spent on different stamps, and it was a lot of fun, that story. And
that's why I always get people to sign a release form before I interview them, because as soon as you said the amount, I'm like, I'm gonna put that in there. You can't do anything about it. Actually, I asked him. I said, he's like, I'm fine with it. I was like, all right. I said, I won't dwell on it, but I have to put it in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, Mike, I'm sorry, you gotta have a question before I cut you off.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a weird question. Interviewing American collectors, American dealers, and European collectors, European dealers, did you find their stories differed in a way? Did that they collected differently, or that their passion behind it was from different origins, or were they same kind of?
I actually felt like with most of the European dealers and collectors, I felt like talking to them about stamps would be like talking to American collectors about mowing the lawn. Like it was just part of their it just was part of their vernacular from day one. There was never, I mean, they were all, like, this is what we do. Kind of like not understanding that we don't have universal health care, right? It's like, wait, what, you actually pay? Like, we have this. So it almost was such part of their lives that it didn't seem as special, because it didn't seem like there's any reason why they wouldn't do it. Like, I don't understand why you collect. Why wouldn't you collect?
It's funny that you say that, because I was going to London once, and I was at customs at Heathrow. And of course, they ask you what your profession is. And I told them I was a philatelist, because I think that's more fun than saying auctioneer or something. And he looks at me like I've got, a second head.
Yeah.
And he says, well, if you wanted to go buy a penny black, where would you go?
Right.
And I said, Stanley Gibbons on the Strand.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, all right, you're good to go. To him, that was not a stamp collector, but he knows Stanley Gibbons.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
it would have been weird for me to have not answered that properly in his mind.
Right. And I could see being so shocked, not remembering what to say. Exactly. Like, very few people who are not older. I mean, if I talk, there's most of the time I'm 49. And so I feel like anybody from 60 on up will know about stamps, but usually nobody else does, No. And so, so it is. So they seem like it seemed more run of the mill for them. So I didn't find it was that special. I should say that David Feldman's story, he's got that Irish storytelling effect, right? So his voice sounds great. He's got just like, he knows where the intonation is perfect. So his story was really good as a one-off, but it didn't fit within like the constraints or the parameters of what I was trying to do.
Yeah. That's a fascinating difference. Charles, sorry.
So for people, I was going to say, we've been talking about this thing for 45 minutes. For people who want to see it, who haven't, I'm sure a lot of people are, they
sure. A lot of people, yeah.
But for the people who now want to seek it out, what are the options for viewing? Where can they go find this?
You can get it on Amazon Prime is probably the best way, or iTunes. You can get it on. You can go to freaksanderrorsfilms.com or freaksanderrors.com. I think they all go to the same place, and they'll all be all the viewing options. So Google Play has it, Amazon Prime, YouTube. It's on YouTube Movies. It's on iTunes, and there's a bunch of other places you can watch it. But any of those would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think I've seen it twice now. Once in Monaco, and then when we came back from Monaco, we sat all our employees down. We bought it on iTunes and we showed it to all our employees.
Oh, you guys, yeah, you guys. I want to thank you guys. Have been a great support of you and your father. I mean, everybody has
Thanks.
been, but it is nice because it is tough because the amount of it's a like I got the deal I got from Gravitas Ventures was 15 years, which seemed absurd until I realized it takes that long to just pay for the marketing and what it costs to actually put this stuff on. But getting it out there, I felt like getting it out there globally would give, especially now, give more an awareness to stamp. I never wanted this to be a commercial for stamp collecting, but what I wanted people to do is make their own decision. So if you saw that and you thought it was interesting, that you might even look into it. And even if it was like 10% of the people out there who saw it, it might help boost an awareness for stamp collecting that most people don't know, exists. That the hobby still exists and it's thriving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you hit fascinating stories, and I think anybody who watches it is definitely going to be bit by the collecting bug in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then and the idea that you can collect, it can be an add-on to anything else you collect. I mean, ephemera is a fantastic way. If you, as Ian was saying, if you collect China, you can find China on stamps. And so I think it's great for kids to help them learn. I think it's great for adults to help to keep their mind occupied and also to learn things. And I think as a community builder, it's great.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, Mark, I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Great job with the podcast.
Yeah, thanks.
And as hopefully things progress, we'd love to hear more about future endeavors. We'd love to be kept in the loop about what else whatever else we can do to help make these plans come true. Just let us know. We'd love to remain involved.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll definitely let you guys know. And if there's any more, I've been obviously there's no screenings going on, but as Scott English and I talk a lot about trying to figure out how to bring it in. The screenings are great. But also I like to get people to actually rent it. So it's, so I'm trying to figure out how to but now everybody's got to rent it. So yeah, I'll let you guys know. And if if anything comes up and it's something, we don't have to talk for an hour, but if something comes up and you want to get back on, we can definitely do it.
Let's do it.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Good talking to you.
Take care.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the film so much in Monaco. And to get a chance to actually talk to Mark about it, and it's like a behind the scenes documentary. That's like a bonus feature on the DVD, I feel. Yeah,
we don't get many of those interviews with the director of a stamp documentary. I think there's just one you can do.
I was going to say it's really without without comparison. It's amazing that there haven't been more people trying to do what he did, but I'm glad it was him. I'm glad it's somebody with such a long history in the hobby, family's long history in the hobby. And I just thought that was great. That was a really fun chat, and I can't wait to see where he goes from here.
Yeah, I'm interested about the traveling.
Do you think you could be the Anthony Bourdain of the philatelic world? Were you angling for a role in the show?
Oh, no, definitely not. I get jet lagged too easily.
You could be sort of like the bad boy of the stamp world, like Bourdain was.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't want to ask him who would, because he said it needed a narrator or.
Next time we talk to him, let's ask him who he would cast.
Who he would cast. That'd be an interesting one. I'm sure it's probably someone he's interviewed.
Alex Hyman, maybe.
All right. Yeah, Alex would be.
Wouldn't have to worry about him aging from season to season.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, that was a great chat for people listening to this. You can also find us on, depending on where you're listening to us, on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
everywhere.
Podbean, everywhere, exactly.
Everywhere. Let's just say everywhere from now on.
We're like the documentary.
Yeah, we're going to link to the documentary in the description. He said the things, but we're going to make them a lot easier for everyone.
Possible.
Yeah,
it's worth seeing. It's absolutely worth your time.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. I've seen it twice now.
I'm gonna go watch it again. That put me in the mood to go fire it up tonight while I cook dinner. So
yeah,
so that was a really fun chat, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, definitely. I think next week. We're talking to James Gavin of the Digital Philatelist. He's really supporting the online community for stamps and creating a website where it's almost a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to find anything philatelic online.
I think it's fun how diverse these interviews are. It's almost like getting whiplash from one week to the next. We go from documentarian to Eric Jackson to Graham Beck to Dana Geyer to Scott English. It's fun that really no 2 weeks back. Look, I think people probably think that stamp collecting is a narrow, finite hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these interviews just show how many, whether it's talking to David Ball about astrophilately or talking to Michael Hines about pre-cancels.
Yeah.
It's fun to be able to take, again, what seems like a limited hobby to an outsider, so many different places. I think it reminds me just how vast and impressive this hobby is, that we can cover so much ground without ever leaving the philatelic world. Yeah,
the reach it has, it definitely connects a lot more people than you'd assume. And it sounds like a lot of people in Europe as well.
Well, we'll start having more, after Sebastian, we'll start having more European guests on as well.
Yeah, we're never going to run out of people to talk to.
I don't know why I hadn't thought of having Ian Gibson-Smith on.
Yeah.
We may have to check the this episode contains adult content box, explicit content box, after talking to Ian.
Yeah.
If we edit that stuff out, we may have the shortest episode of the podcast. But no, I was going to say, there's just so many ways we can branch out. I'm really looking forward to future episodes.
Yeah.
And this conversation was a lot of fun, as always.
Yep, absolutely. I will see you next time.
Talk real soon.